Hey, and a warm welcome to the Into the LightWeb podcast. And it is another episode of Ask Joanna and Skylar. So today's question comes from one of my clients, and she writes, could you please speak more about being the holder of the light and a clearer vision for my family when they are in the deep story of the monster under the bed, so to speak, in the trenches of the drama of the problems we're currently facing? How do I hold this clearer light more of the time? So this is what I call a juicy question. Hey, and a very warm welcome to the Into the LightWeb podcast with me, your hostess, Joanna Hunter, metaphysical teacher, spiritual life and business coach, published author, and the high priestess of the LightWeb, a spiritual technology that will change your life. This is the place to be to talk everything under the LightWeb, from consciousness, relationships, to money, to spiritual business, and everything in between. Let's get into it. So when we are the holder of the light, perhaps we, first and foremost, the really important thing within this question is that it is us that desires the change, right? Because one of the things that we tend to do is we tend to take our energy and our family's energy and jam them all up together. And then we code for massive amounts of frustration and resentment, because guess what? Those free-thinking humans that are our families aren't doing what we want. So the most important thing here is that we separate our energy out a little bit and that we acknowledge that this is what I want. I want this change. And have you ever heard the saying that people don't do as you say, they do as you do? And it is very, very true here. And the key here is to lead by example, is to hold the light, not for your family, but to hold the light for yourself first and foremost. Yes, if you get to the places that you want to go. Yes, if you start to manifest your dream life. Yes, it will affect your family. And yes, it will improve their lives too. But here's the thing. It has to improve your life first and foremost. So as we start moving forward and moving and trying to hold the light for everybody else, what happens is that because we're doing it for ourselves first and foremost, when our family are not on board or maybe don't see the vision that you can see, what happens is that if we are not holding the energy first and foremost for ourselves, we're holding the energy, trying to hold it for everybody. The minute that they don't appear to be on board with the changes that you want to make or the things that you want to create, what happens is your energy starts to go wah, 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 and you start to get angry, resentful, and you start to feel hard done by. You start to feel like these guys don't listen, these guys aren't doing what you want, and we can get really, really caught into our own drama of that as well. So the key is to see their stuff, see their drama, see all the things that are going on, but to keep your energy somewhat separate and say, I want these changes for myself first and foremost. If they benefit my family, great. But I deserve to have these changes. And yes, you might think that your family deserves to have those changes too. And absolutely, you're allowed to think that. But here's the thing, you can't think and feel for them, but you can think and feel for yourself. So it's really, really important that you don't empower other people within the journey that you're going on, that you lead by example. And remember, the faith that I had to be able to lead by example within my own life and be able to apply this and embody these teachings that I'm teaching now in my own life was this idea of people don't do as you say, they do as you do. So I could say, yeah, let's all get like on the positive train and let's all do this. And then the moment that they weren't like conforming, I get annoyed at them and I would enter into a disempowered state for myself, which I call the blame game. I'd start blaming them for our lack of results. When I made the results in my life 100% me, nobody else, and I made those results like 100% me, they weren't anybody else's results. What I began to really create was momentum. And then what happened was that as the vision that I was holding and holding the light began unfolding, my family started little by little getting more and more on board of what I was doing. But now I was leading by example. I wasn't saying to them, we have to do this together, because if I said that we had to do this together and they weren't maybe able to visualize or hold the vision that I could see for myself and for our family, then what happened is that the moment that they fell out of faith, the moment they fell into doubt, I would get frustrated because maybe they would slow their roll and then I would blame our collective lack of progress on them instead of realizing, actually, you know what? So I want to talk about one more thing in this whole subject, because it's all very well deciding, right? Okay, lifeboat for one. I am going to be my own rescue. I am going to really hold the light. I am going to lead by example. I am not going to empower the rest of them in this. I don't need them to do all of these things. But I want to, and I would be earnest in talking about this subject if I didn't go into why do we perceive that we do need them to be on board? Why do we perceive that we need them to be there? And so this was a whole big exploration for me when I went into the energy myself and realized that I was getting really annoyed and frustrated at my family for not wanting to do what I wanted to do, or not having the vision that I held and not having the vision that I had, or maybe they couldn't see how things could be different for us. And it wasn't a case of like, maybe they didn't believe, but it was a case of they couldn't see. And then, but when I started to really examine of like, why had I looked so hard for so long for them to like, and I get so frustrated because I'd be like, if they could just get on board, like we could do great things. And it would be very like frustrating. But when I started to examine what was my pathological need for my family to be on board with me, like what was that, like why did I have such a strong drive and need for that? And I began to look at it, and what I realized is an energy that I call my wee Suki blanket. So if you're not Scottish, you might not know what that is. Have you ever seen those kids and they've got one of those really like yucky blankets where the corners all frayed and they're sitting there with it's like a little comfort blanket. What I realized was that I needed my family to be my wee Suki blanket, because basically it was kind of scary holding the vision, and it was kind of scary putting myself out there and going for the vision, because I had no guarantees that I would be able to pull it off. And so that is a very frightening and very, very scary place to be. So in order to lessen that fear that I held, it was easier to try and empower my family into the whole shindig, into getting them all into the energy as well. And I had to get my husband on board, and I had to get my kids on board, and everybody had to be on board. And then, of course, when some of them couldn't see what I could see and they weren't on board, I'd get upset and I'd get frustrated, instead of realizing actually the unfulfilled need here was my own self-doubt. And realizing, and I asked myself the question, I just put my hand on my heart, took a deep breath and said, can I handle and work through my own self-doubt? And the answer was yes. Yes, I can handle and I can work through my own self-doubt. So that diminished the need to get my family on board. And then I could really just focus on the job at hand of being the vision keeper, holding the vision, being my own rescue. In being my own rescue, as the first title of my book is Get Selfish, the Way is Through. The way is through. So as I started building that, it became easier and easier for the people around me to see what was possible, because I was literally leading the way, and I was leading the way to what was possible. And no longer did I need the members of my family to be my wee Suki blanket. I didn't need them to be my blanket anymore, because I was dealing with a real fear. The only reason I wanted them to be my blanket in the first place was because I had doubt. I had fears myself, but I was able to deal and tackle with those fears head on, as opposed to, it's like that kind of scene in a movie where somebody like grabs somebody else and shoves them in front of them, and it's like that. And that's what I was trying to do in my family. I was like, I had this big scary vision that was huge, big soul mission in front of me. And yeah, sure, it was so much easier to try and recruit everybody in my whole family. And it was like, anytime it got scary, it was like I grabbed one of those humans that I had recruited and like shoved them in front. And and of course it's funny image to think of it like that, but it was just my own fear, and realizing that dealing with my own fear is something that I'm 100% responsible for, and 100% I can do. And it's the same with you. You can 100% deal with your fears. You can 100% deal with what's coming up. So it's really powerful and potent when we decide to step into this role of being the vision keeper and being the light, and deciding. One of the things, and I know that this goes very against the conditioning of when you're in a family and when you have, children and things like that. The idea is that we should all want the same thing. And I think for me, it was definitely a transition in thinking, was that it felt really selfish to kind of like be like, well, fuck them, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And I felt like a really kind of selfish thing. But what I realized was that everybody is on their own journey. And I know that that's so overused and kind of cheesy to hear everyone's on their own journey, but it's actually true. And I can't want that. I can want things for my kids, and I can want things for my partner, and I can want things in life. But at the end of the day, if these people don't want that themselves, then there's nothing I can do, right? There's nothing I can do. I can want it a lot for them, but if they don't want those things themselves, but there's one person I can be 100% responsible for, and 100% I know what they're feeling, I know what they're thinking, I know what they desire, I know what they want, and that's me. And so it's important that I walk in truth with myself. It's important that I choose myself, and that I choose my dreams and my vision. And that even though I know some of my dreams and my visions would affect my family, as in AK earning more money was one of my dreams and one of my visions, and learning to earn more money, yes, it affected my family because my family benefited as a result of that. But it was very, very difficult to make that happen while I was trying to empower my family in the vision and in the dream. I was making it their issue too. And at the end of the day, it came to what I call radical self-honesty, of really being honest with myself and saying, do you want this, Joanna? Do you want this? And as I fell into that energy, I was like, yes, I want this. Okay, well, then you are worthy of going for it. And then I kind of like unhooked my family from it. And it was just me and my vision. And it was my job to unfold that vision. It was no longer my family's job to be my cheerleader, to be on board. It was no longer anybody else's job but mine, which meant I was 100% in control of the situation. Because no more energy expending out to other people, right? Because I knew it was my job. And yes, it was terrifying. It was terrifying and it was scary, and all the best journeys are. They're terrifying and they're scary. But they're also exciting. And it was a very, very exciting journey of learning. And as I took those steps, my family then used their free will and their conscious choice to come on board and say, hey, what can I do to help here? Or, hey, how can I lend a hand here? And what that did was that then became not a need, but a cherry on top. Instead of before, it was everything that I wanted. I just wanted them to like show up for this. And they were showing up for a vision that existed in my head and only I could see. And then I was getting like really, really bummed because the picture was so clear for me of what I could see. And I got really, really bummed when they didn't get it. And I was thinking, you don't want us to succeed. That's a story. Of course, my family wanted us as a family unit to succeed. They just couldn't see the vision that I could see. So, but as I started to unfold that vision, obviously the vision started to unfold and become a thing and a real thing. And there was physical things that they could see now. They started to realize like, hey, this is pretty cool. This is like good. And then because people do as you do and they don't do as you say, now I was doing as I do. And they were wanting to kind of like, hey, how can I get on board with this now? And that made it easier. Now it's very, very easy when that happens. And the switch has been flipped and your family are now starting to support something or starting to support a vision that you have. And whereas before maybe they weren't as supportive because they couldn't see the vision, that you can start to feel resentful, that you can start to feel like, oh, well, now when the physical evidence is here, now you want to help me. But that's your ego. That's just your ego. The reason that you needed those people in the first place and that you felt that you needed them so much was a manifestation of your own fear. If you can deal with your own fear, the ego is a doddle. If you can just deal with your own fears around the situation and realize, I don't need a little Suki blanket. A big grown-ass woman, I can look at those fears and I can stare that fear in the eye and I can work it out. And I just approached it with that attitude. And if you approach it with that attitude, it becomes easier to be the vision keeper for your entire family, to hold a vision, unfold a vision. You're now no longer empowering everybody within your family to be responsible for unfolding the vision. You're responsible yourself for unfolding the vision. And then when the vision starts to come into fruition, then your family will start to realize and see, oh, wow, it is possible. But the thing is, in activating this vision for me, I've been able to activate my kids in different ways too. Whereas my children before maybe thought in places of limitation, now they think in less limitation and are more open to, things happening. For example, my daughter wanted to move a flat. She wanted to move flat and she's down at university and she wanted to move flat. So she began to unfold this vision of moving apartment. So when my daughter was looking for an apartment, instead of thinking a limitation, at the time she didn't really have the money for moving and things like that, but she started opening up her energy and saying, okay, well, how could this happen? And, in using a lot of the tools that I had learned over the last few years, and she was using them for herself. And, even though and she decided that she wanted to have a group of flatmates, some of them were on the course with her and things like that, and some of them were friends and part of her friend group. And even though it was really difficult ask to find an apartment with 6 bedrooms, they found an apartment with 6 bedrooms. And, and I know that she manifested that. I know wholeheartedly that she did not think in ways of limitation and made that happen for herself. So I think these are some of the exciting things that happens when you're willing to become the vision keeper, is that people don't do as you say, but they do as you do. And as you start walking that and embodying the vision that you have, others start to be inspired by you and start to be inspired and see that things are possible for them as well. But if we are always looking for our family to be our wee Suki blanket, what we do is we disempower ourselves, and we often disempower our families at the same time. We build a lot of resentment and a lot of frustration. And there's no need. We don't have to do that. We can do it another way where we are solely responsible for our energy and ourselves. And yes, we're maybe in relationships, and yes, we maybe have children. But the thing is, we don't need to pile everybody else on into our frequency and vibration. Our frequency is our frequency, and it's about you and the universe and your relationship to that. And so I hope this answer was really helpful and beneficial.